Kindergarten, did you finish your worksheet? Okay, let's read our story one more time so that we can understand it a little bit better and so that we can check that worksheet and make sure that you colored only the characters. Get yourselves cozy. Here we go. The Elves and the Shoemaker, adapted by Amy Ehrlich. There was once a shoemaker who became poorer and poorer as the years went by. Do you know what it means if you're poor? It means that you don't have something. So I think that maybe this shoemaker is poor, meaning he doesn't have very much money. At last, he had leather enough only for one pair of shoes. In the evening, he cut out the pattern and then he went to sleep. So whenever somebody sews like a shirt or pants or shoes, they cut out the pattern, they cut out the shape of it first, and then they can go and sew it all together. So he cut it all out. So he did some of his work for the next day already, and then he thought, okay, I'll finish it up in the morning, and he went to bed. The next morning, he took up a needle and thread, meaning to sew the shoes. But there they stood, neatly sewn and finished on his table. The shoemaker could not believe his eyes. Not a stitch was out of place, and the work was better than any he had ever seen. Kindergarten, somebody had already sewn those shoes. He cut them out at night, he went to bed, and then in the morning he took his needle and his thread, and he was getting ready to sew them together, and then he looked and they were already sewn all together. Would you be surprised if you went to bed and you woke up the next morning and all of your schoolwork was already done? Whoa, what a surprise that would be. Oh my. As he held the shoes, marveling at them, a customer entered the shop. He was so pleased with the shoes that he paid far more than the ordinary price, and the shoemaker was able to buy leather for 2 pairs of shoes. So a customer came in looking for some shoes, saw the pair of shoes that were somehow already made when the shoemaker woke up that day, liked them a lot, so he paid a little bit more than what they were actually worth. So if the shoemaker was going to ask $10 for the shoes, this man may have paid $15 for the shoes. 15 is bigger than 10. He cut them out in the evening and the next morning prepared to begin work. But there was no need for it because the shoes had already been made and were as well stitched and handsome as the other pair. The first 2 customers who came into his shop bought them for a good price. And this time, the shoemaker was able to buy leather enough for 4 pairs of shoes. So he sold the first pair of shoes and was able to buy enough leather, that's what shoes are made out of, for 2 pairs of shoes. Those shoes were made somehow in the middle of the night, and they sold really well, so now the shoemaker has enough money to buy enough leather to make 4 pairs of shoes. Is he making a lot of money or a little bit of money? He's making a lot of money. Early the next morning, the 4 pairs of shoes were finished as before, and so it went. What the shoemaker cut out at night was finished in the morning, and customers were never lacking. Do you know what lacking means? If you lack, it means that you don't have a lot of something, kind of like the word poor. So if Miss Stahler went to go knit something and she didn't have any yarn, she might say that she's lacking in yarn. I'm never lacking in yarn. I always have a lot of yarn. Soon the shoemaker became a wealthy man. Wealthy means rich. He has a lot of money now. Always he wondered about the skill of the work, and one evening he said to his wife, "How would it be if we were to sit up tonight to see who has been helping us these many months?" She agreed at once, and so they did not go to bed, but lit a candle and hid themselves in a corner of the room. So they're going to stay up all night and see who is making these shoes. Is there ever a time during the year when you have thought about staying up all night to see if someone comes in the middle of the night? I can think of a time. Christmas Eve. Let's keep reading, kindergarten. Just at midnight, 2 little men came and sat down at the shoemaker's table. They immediately began to work. They stitched and hammered and sewed so neatly and quickly that the shoemaker was amazed. As soon as everything was finished and stood upon the table, they ran quickly away. "The little men have made us rich, and I think we ought to thank them," said the shoemaker's wife in the morning. "I shall sew them tiny shirts and pants and coats and knit them tiny caps and socks. You must make them each a pair of shoes." The shoemaker and his wife worked hard all day and had everything ready by evening. Then they hid themselves to see how the little men would receive their presents. So they want to say thank you to the elves for what they've done. So they decided to make them some clothes and some shoes. At midnight, the two came back into the room and sat down at the table. But instead of leather cut out and waiting, they found wonderful little clothes. First, the little men were surprised, and then they were delighted. They put on the shirts and pants and coats and socks and caps, and they buckled the tiny shoes upon their feet. When they were done, they ran their hands up and down the pretty clothes and admired each other, singing, "Now that we're boys so fine and neat, why cobble more for others' feet?" They hopped and danced about the shoemaker's shop, leaping over chairs and tables, and then out the door. From this night on, the two little men came back no more. They never came back. But the shoemaker continued to do well as long as he lived and had good luck in all he attempted. So those little elves helped him get really started with his shoe shop. And now, since he has everything he needs, he has enough money to go and buy more leather for shoes. Now he is doing really well. So those elves really helped that shoemaker out. Kindergarten, you had a job today, and your job was to take this worksheet and color only the pictures of the characters from the story that we read, The Elves and the Shoemaker. So if you're not done, pause the video and go finish. And if you are done, let's go through. Now, I don't want you to fix anything, but we can talk about it, okay? Don't fix anything, though, because I want to see how you did. Let's go ahead and let's talk about it. So, we're coloring pictures of the characters that we heard in our story. Let's look at the first set of characters. Elves. Were there elves in our story? There were. The story is called The Elves and the Shoemaker. Would it make sense if there were no elves in our story? No! So there are definitely elves. You should have colored this picture. Let's look at our next character. A rabbit. Oh, was there a rabbit in our story? No rabbit in our story. Should you have colored this picture? Nope, not this picture. Let's look here. A bear. Was there a bear in our story? No bear in our story either, so you should not have colored this picture. Remember, kindergarten, don't fix anything right now because I want to see how you did. So don't fix anything. I want to see how you did, but we can go through and look at it. Let's go down here. Here's a shoemaker. Was there a shoemaker in our story called The Elves and the Shoemaker? There was. Of course there's going to be a shoemaker in a story called The Elves and the Shoemaker, so you should have colored this picture. The shoemaker's wife. Was there a shoemaker's wife in our story? There was. It was her idea to sew the new clothes for the elves that helped. That was her idea. She is in our story. And a little girl. Was there a little girl in our story? Nope, no little girl. Not in this story. So kindergarten, the only ones that you should have colored are the elves, the shoemaker, and the shoemaker's wife. Remember, don't fix anything, but you can look it over and see how you did. Make sure your first and last name are at the top, kindergarten. And before I let you go right now, here's our bucket. And here's our warm fuzzy. Kindergarten, keep up the great work. You are really filling my bucket right now.